The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The SNP's policy of gender self-ID has now been ruled to be unlawful by our highest court. SNP politicians, including Nicola Sturgeon and John Swinney, were willing to trash women's rights while pushing their dangerous and divisive ideology. Common sense and a basic respect for biological truth have now prevailed thanks to the incredible Scottish women who would not wish. The SNP's fringe obsession has cost obscene amounts of taxpayers' money and wasted huge amounts of government time while public services were neglected. Politicians have a duty to hold up their hands and admit their mistakes. So will John Swinney finally apologise to the women of Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government accepts the judgment of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that women in the Equality Act 2010 is defined by biological sex, and the Government accepts that ruling. I also accept that the Court emphasised that this decision does not reduce trans people's protections from discrimination, whether or not they have a gender recognition certificate. The Equality Act expressly prohibits discrimination and harassment against trans people, and it's not necessary to have a GRC in order to be protected. I believe the vast majority of people in Scotland want to live in a country that is respectful, compassionate and caring, and I'm committed to protecting the rights of all, and that will guide all of my actions as First Minister.
Russell Finlay.
For John Swinney, it seems that sorry really is the hardest word to say. And we know why, because he's not sorry. The SNP still believes in gender self-ID. 2 months ago, John Swinney said that he accepts that trans women are women. Yesterday, he dodged the same question and he said there will be plenty of opportunities for that. Well, here's his opportunity. Are trans women women? The court ruling makes this clear, and as a result, Scotland's public bodies must now abandon SNP gender policies and respect the rule of law. For the country to move on and for trust to be rebuilt, it's important for the Government to accept accountability and to own its mistakes. So will John Swinney at least now admit that he got this so very wrong?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as the Supreme Court judgment narrates, there is a complex reconciliation of 2 pieces of legislation that the Scottish Government is obliged to work within. And those are the Gender Recognition Act 2004 and the Equality Act 2010. Now, I remind Russell Finlay that on 2 occasions, the Scottish Government's legislation that was passed in 2018, which was the subject of the legal challenge, was supported by decisions taken in courts in Scotland. Now, that was not the case in the Supreme Court judgment, and I accept unreservedly the Supreme Court judgment. As Mr Finlay knows, I am a believer in the rule of law. Therefore, the Government will take the steps. As the Social Justice Secretary set out to Parliament on Tuesday, to make sure that all of the regulatory changes that are required to be made in the light of the decision of the Supreme Court are made, and we will draw, as we did on the previous guidance, on the input of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, as the Government is obliged to do, given they are the regulators of the Equality Act 2010.
Russell Finlay.
We spent years telling the SNP to drop this nonsense and get back to the day job. They refused to listen. They were absolutely obsessed. Now John Swinney doesn't want to talk about it because mainstream Scotland has turned against him, and the harms caused by gender self-ID are real. Female prisoners were the first target of SNP gender ideology. And today, a prison officer told me that staff still face disciplinary action if they call male sex offenders identifying as female he or him. Now, following the scandal of a rapist in a women's prison, there are still male prisoners in the female estate, and that's despite last week's seismic court ruling. So will John Swinney now instruct the Scottish Prison Service to ensure male prisoners do their time in men's prisons?
First Minister.
As the Government has set out to Parliament already, we are considering the details of the Supreme Court judgment, taking the necessary advice from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission about the application of that advice, and that will have a bearing on the judgments that are made in relation to public services. And I will expect, as is, I think, well established in our politics and our discourse, all public bodies, including the Scottish Prison Service, to operate on that basis and within the law.
Russell Finlay.
That's just a typically weak and evasive response. The SNP's focus on radical gender ideology hasn't just impacted in prisons, it has damaged trust in politics. It showed Holyrood had lost the plot and Nicola Sturgeon was detached from reality. John Swinney has got a chance to be his own man and go a different way from his closest ally, who isn't even showing up at work anymore. He could guarantee all public bodies will have new and lawful policies to respect women's rights in place by summer. He could be honest and admit that trans women are not women. He could hold his hands up and apologise fully and sincerely. John Swinney could ditch Nicola Sturgeon's toxic legacy once and for all. Will he now take the chance to finally bring to the end the era of divisive gender politics?
First Minister.
President Officer, in one of Mr Finlay's earlier questions, he said to me the Conservatives had been warning about all of this for years. I want to read to Parliament the comments made by Alison Harris, who was a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Conservatives in the last Parliament, on Tuesday the 30th of January 2018.
Members.
And from the official report to Parliament, Alison Harris said this: "As a member of the Equalities and Human Rights Committee, Annie Wells was pleased to see positive changes being made at Stage 2 to the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Bill. In particular, she was pleased to see the committee agree to Mary Fee's Amendment 10, which sought to broaden the definition of woman so that the legislation should be inclusive as possible, recognising that not all trans women possess...
Members.
Recognising that not all trans women possess a gender recognition certificate." I simply read that into the official report to show that the...
Members, I'm very keen that as many members are able to take part in this session as possible, and if we could ensure we could hear one another, that would be helpful.
I'm simply reading that into the official report because the Conservatives have changed their position on this, and they have changed their position from what they said in 2018. What my government will do, Presiding Officer, is my government will do what it always does: follow the rule of law, take careful account of the decisions and the context in which we take our decisions, and act wisely to protect the rights of all within Scotland, because the first duty of the government is to protect the rights of everyone in Scottish society.
Thank you. Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, yesterday I joined political leaders, faith leaders and charities at the Summit Against Polarisation and Disenfranchisement. And as I warned at the summit, this cannot look like some kind of Scottish establishment talking to itself, distant from the realities facing Scots. But as I feared, what was missing was any reflection on SNP government failure and how that drives people to divisive politics. So why does John Swinney not recognise that to tackle division and polarisation, we need a Scottish Government that actually delivers for the people?
First Minister.
Well, that's what the people of Scotland have got, because in a whole variety of different areas, this government is delivering for the people of Scotland. Families in Scotland benefit from having 1,140 hours of early learning and childcare for all 3- and 4-year-olds and for eligible 2-year-olds. We have a rising investment in our housing sector, tackling the housing emergency, building on the fact that we have built more affordable houses per head of population than in other parts of the United Kingdom. We have low unemployment in Scotland today, and we have progress been made in reducing waiting lists and waiting times in the National Health Service. And crucially, on the issue that absolutely matters to me, we in Scotland are seeing falls in child poverty when they are rising in the rest of the United Kingdom. And I fear that the progress we're making in Scotland is going to be damaged by the welfare reforms of the United Kingdom's Labour government.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, that complacency is part of the problem and proves John Swinney does not get it. The measure for success for the Scottish Government is how it uses its power to improve the lives of Scots. For 18 years, John Swinney and the SNP have been in charge of our NHS, but we have 1 in 6 Scots on a waiting list. For 18 years, John Swinney and the SNP have been in charge of housing, but we have 10,000 children with nowhere to call home. For 18 years, John Swinney and the SNP have been in charge of keeping Scots safe, but we have gang violence on our streets and blades being taken into primary schools. The gulf between the SNP government's rhetoric and the reality faced by people across our country could not be starker. So can't John Swinney see that he and his party's failures have made them the architects of divisive politics in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, I will set out to Parliament frequently the record of this government upon which I am very proud to stand. We are giving young people in their families the best start in life by the most extensive early learning and childcare offer in the United Kingdom. On housing, we've delivered 47% more affordable homes per head of population than in England, and 73% more than in Wales, where the Labour Party has been in power for even longer than we have been in power. In Scotland, on waiting times, we promised 75,000 NHS surgeries would be, 64,000 NHS procedures would be delivered in a 12-month period, and 75,500 have been delivered extra in the period to January 2025. So this government is focused on eradicating child poverty, improving our public services, achieving net zero and boosting the economy. That's what this government is about, and that's what we're delivering for the people of Scotland day in and day out.
Anna Sarwar.
John Swinney's head is in the sand, and it proves why he can't be the person to lead the fight against disenfranchisement and polarisation of our politics, because he simply doesn't get it. Record-long waiting lists and record levels of homelessness amongst our children on John Swinney and the SNP's watch. After nearly 2 decades in power, if the SNP had a plan to improve the lives of Scots, then we'd have seen it by now. And research from Carnegie UK has revealed that 63% of Scots feel they can't influence decisions in Scotland, and 40% of Scots have low trust in MSPs. And is it any wonder, from ferries that don't sail to astronomical levels of waste of public money, this SNP government deliver nothing and tell Scots to be happy about it? Because the fact is the SNP government has lost its way and is out of steam, and they're responsible for divisive politics in our country, so they can't be the ones to sort it. So isn't the truth that we will only tackle division and disengagement if we have a Scottish Government that actually serves the people of Scotland, and the only way to deliver that is to remove the SNP from power?
First Minister.
Well, let's take a moment to see how the last change of government process went in the United Kingdom. And last summer, the Labour government was elected on a commitment to end austerity, to deliver change. And what have the Labour government done? The Labour government have delivered a continuation of austerity.
Let's hear one another.
A continuation of austerity. And I cannot believe the Labour Party is comfortable with the fact that their United Kingdom government is going to deliver welfare reforms that will increase poverty levels in the United Kingdom. Now, I invite Parliament to think about that point for just one moment. A Labour government has come into office and poverty is going to rise. That demonstrates there is no point in the Labour Party, because Labour deliver poverty and austerity to the people of Scotland when this SNP government is reducing child poverty in this country. I'll take that to the country and be proud of our record.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After 4 years of asking, I've finally got the message. I'm pretty sure I know when the Cabinet is next going to meet. Thanks to Jamie Green's principled defection to the Liberal Democrats, I need never trouble the First Minister with that question ever again. Presiding Officer, there is a crisis in teacher training. Over the last 3 years, the Scottish Government has aimed to recruit 750 maths teachers, to train 750 maths teachers. In reality, it has missed that target by a country mile, training only a third of the maths teachers that Scotland needs. So can I ask the First Minister, what is going wrong?
First Minister.
First of all, can I say that I'm glad I've been relieved of the burden of trying to remember when the Cabinet meets on a weekly basis. So, I welcome Jamie Green to his position on the Liberal Democrat benches. I'm not at all surprised to see him over there. He looked decidedly uncomfortable over there for an awful long time, like many others, I dare say. Listen. I'm very happy about it all. I'm very happy about it all. In relation,
let's hear one another.
In relation to the substantive point, that Mr. Cole-Hamilton puts to me. There are challenges in the recruitment of teachers to particular specialisms, and the Government has acknowledged that in the steps that we have taken forward with, for example, the Teaching Bursary Scheme, which provides a £20,000 bursary to career changers, which is particularly aimed at maths teachers, individuals who aspired to be maths teachers, to recognise if they were leaving jobs in perhaps other sectors to go into teaching, we had to provide a mechanism to enable them to do so. So those mechanisms have been available. The Government provides over £186 million to support the recruitment and retention of teachers to ensure that we reach 2023 levels in our local authority employment of teachers. So the Government is working in partnership with local authorities to ensure that we can achieve that objective.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, it's clearly not working, and whilst that was a predictably managerial reply from the First Minister, this is our kids we're talking about. This is about their futures. Where is the hunger? Where is the passion to resolve this? And it's not just maths. It's not just maths. Chemistry, physics, biology, each of them hundreds of trainee teachers short. And the Government says there's an economic urgency to address our digital skills shortage, yet it is only training 16 computing teachers this year. 16 for the whole of Scotland. We need homegrown skills if we're going to lead in industries like renewables, AI, defence, precision medicine. In this volatile world, amid the economic firestorm of the Trump presidency, Scotland's people are our biggest asset. But how are we going to compete if our schools can't teach these subjects properly because they just don't have the teachers?
First Minister.
I agree with Mr Cole-Hamilton about the economic challenges that we face as a consequence of the decisions of the Trump administration and the volatility that has flown from that. That's why I gathered together a range of stakeholders during the Easter recess to ensure that the Government is well sighted on the issues that have been faced by individual sectors as a consequence of these unwelcome changes in international trading arrangements which generate a great deal of volatility. What we will do is, in relation to the points on education, is work with our local authority partners to increase teacher numbers. We gave that was one of the central commitments in the budget process that we negotiated with our local authority colleagues. The Government has delivered its side of the bargain in relation to financial support to local authorities, and I look to local authorities to recruit. There is, of course, cooperation through the Strategic Board for Teacher Education, which explores all the issues about recruitment and addresses some of the challenges, which is where the bursary scheme came from as a consequence of practical endeavour by the Government to address these issues. So I assure Mr Cole-Hamilton there is no lack of energy within Government to ensure that our schools are well supported with the recruitment of teachers to meet the needs of children and young people in Scotland today.
Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. to ask the First Minister, in light of the reported issues arising from proposed rural nursery closures or mothballing, including the potential impact on the sustainability of rural communities and the operation of primary schools, whether the Scottish Government will review the relevant legislation and the guidance on criteria for protecting rural primary schools.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government recognises the vital role rural schools and early years provision play in sustaining local communities. Responsibility for decisions about local provisions rests with local authorities. Any closure, temporary or permanent, should be considered in consultation with local communities. We are reviewing guidance on mothballing to provide greater clarity on whether it is an appropriate action to take. This will ensure local decisions are based on effective engagement with the community and better reflect the needs of rural families and help maintain access to early learning in these communities.
Christine Graham.
I thank the First Minister for his answer, because across Scotland and indeed in the Scottish borders, 7 rural nurseries are threatened with so-called mothballing. Many are physically attached to the primaries, such as Channelkirk and Walkerburn in my constituency, just through a doorway, so school and nursery are actually as one. Children have the same teacher, head teacher, share meal times with the primary pupils, so transition and integration is simply not an issue. They just move next door. So it's my belief, for educational and social reasons, as well as sustaining that primary school and the wider community, in these circumstances, these particular nurseries require added protection. So I'm pleased to hear what the First Minister says, and in the review of the guidance, will he consider, given what I've said, additional criteria for retaining nurseries, which actually form part of the school?
First Minister.
I think Christine Graham makes an absolutely compelling argument, because at the heart of the reforms on early learning and childcare, the Government has been working with our local authority partners to ensure that young people are able to get the best start to their early years education, and that has a natural progression into the school, in which particularly in many schools in primary 1 and in some schools in primary 2, there will still be a play-based curriculum, which has been the foundation of the early years experience for 3- and 4-year-olds and for some 2-year-olds. So that structural point that Christine Graham makes about the school is also a structural point about the curriculum as well, and the approach that we take to getting young people the best start in life. So we will reflect on the points that Christine Graham has made, because I think they are substantive considerations in making sure that we have that provision available in all communities within Scotland, which is what the Government is funding by the local authority settlement that we put in place.
Stephen Kerr.
And on the subject of the closure of rural primary schools, during the consultation process on the proposed closure of Blackness Primary School, parents accused Falkirk Council of deliberately spreading misleading information and, worse still, frightening the children in the school by telling them that their school was going to close. So would the First Minister agree with me that the Scottish Government must now step in to properly investigate how this consultation was conducted and ensure that the voices of parents and families are not just heard but respected?
First Minister.
Providing officers, there are very strict elements of legislation in place around any question of a rural school closure, and that has to be followed assiduously as part of the statutory process. Now, if Mr Kerr wishes to write to the Education Secretary with the points that he's raising in detail about the situation at Blackness School, that will be considered by the Government. I would remind Mr Kerr that local authorities are independent bodies. The Government does not control local authorities. It is for local authorities to come to their own decisions, but they must operate within the statutory provision that Parliament has determined on this question.
Thank you. Question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what impact the Scottish Government anticipates that the Supreme Court judgment regarding For Women Scotland Limited versus the Scottish Minister will have on the implementation of the public sector equality duty in Scotland.
First Minister.
President Officer, the Scottish Government accepts the Supreme Court's judgment. This Government is committed to protecting everyone's rights, including through effective implementation of the public sector equality duty. We continue to take forward a phased programme of improvement to the operation of the public sector equality duty in Scotland, and of course will consider the impact of the Supreme Court's ruling in that work. The Cabinet Secretaries for Health and Social Care and Social Justice will meet with the Equality and Human Rights Commission later today and will be seeking an update on timing of their revised guidance, which is essential to fulfilling the statutory underpinnings of the approach that we take.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Presiding Officer, as mentioned in this chamber earlier this week, I was honoured to attend and witness the UK Supreme Court judgment which provided clarity on what a woman is. Yet some in this chamber refuse to accept it. Whilst it is now the law that biological sex trumps gender identity, self-ID remains central to the SNP government. That is the same SNP government which presided over public bodies suspending nurses for refusing to share changing rooms with biological male colleagues and allowing dangerous male prisoners to be sent to women's prisons. Public bodies need clarity. Every day of delay risks further uncertainty. So can the First Minister give me a clear answer? When will the SNP government be issuing new guidance on compliance with the Supreme Court's judgment?
First Minister.
I give Pam Gossel the assurance that we will develop that guidance in a timely manner. There is a meeting today, as I said in my opening answer, with the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, whose advice we relied upon in the previous guidance that we had in place, and whose advice and guidance we will have to rely upon in the future. And the Government will report to Parliament about the progress that's been made in that respect. But I recognise the need for us to put in place timely guidance to apply the judgment that has been arrived at by the Supreme Court.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Public Administration section of the Finance Committee recently met with the outgoing Permanent Secretary, and it was clear from evidence to the committee that the Scottish civil servants are being subjected to internal policies that have not adhered to the public sector equality duty, with women's networks allowing men to self-identify into membership and policies being developed over private spaces where no input was sought around sex as a protected characteristic. Now, the First Minister has made clear that there's now considerable work underway, but will he personally ensure that that work puts women's voices as 57% of the Scottish civil service at the heart of these kind of policies and really make sure that the public sector equality duty is met?
First Minister.
I intend to ensure that the public sector equality duty is met, and we will act, as I have made clear to Parliament in all of my answers on this subject, within the law. Obviously, there was legal clarity given by the Supreme Court last week, and the Government has to consider the details of that ruling to enable it to be applied in taking forward the public sector equality duty.
Ash Regan.
Presiding Officer, the Court of Session ruling against Scottish Borders Council marks yet another legal failure to uphold long-standing protections for women and children, this time involving a primary school child. And it exposes this broader pattern of public bodies disregarding the Equality Act of 2010 and other regulations in place since 1967. The undue influence of activist lobby groups like LGBT Youth Scotland has led to policies breaching single-sex safeguards. All such policies must now be withdrawn. Will public funding finally be withdrawn from organisations that are wrongly advising that gender self-ID is lawful in Scotland when it never has been?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, throughout this whole discussion, I have made clear that the rule of law must be the central consideration of the actions of government. And that is what we will take forward in all of our judgments. I am aware of the judicial review decision that was announced by the Court of Session yesterday in relation to Scottish Borders Council. That is not a judgment that involves the government, it involves Scottish Borders Council. But of course the government will consider the issues that arise out of that as we consider all aspects of the reform of regulation that is required.
Douglas Ross.
This is a very straightforward question. Does the First Minister believe that a trans woman is a woman? Yes or no?
First Minister.
I have set out that the Scottish Government accepts the judgment of the Supreme Court, which ruled which ruled that a woman in the Equality Act 2010 is defined by biological sex.
Thank you. Question number 6, Ariane Burgess.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on when the Scottish Government expects to respond to the Loch Long Salmon Farm planning application.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is giving full and proper consideration to this appeal, and every effort has been made to issue a decision as soon as possible. It would, of course, not be appropriate for me to say any more in relation to what is a live planning case.
Ariane Burgess.
The industrial salmon farm development proposed for Loch Long will scar the lost coastline and harm its wildlife. It's been opposed by the community, the local planning authority and even the industry. But we've now been waiting over a year for the government's response after the application was called in. First Minister, more than 4,000 people have written to the government asking it to protect Loch Long from this damaging development. Will the First Minister personally assure that my constituents' voices are listened to?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as I indicated in my earlier answer, I cannot go into details on the handling of a live planning appeal. What I will say is that all relevant information will be considered by ministers in coming to a determination on this issue, and that determination will be arrived at as soon as it is practically possible to do so.
Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's been more than a year since the Loch Long Salmon semi-closed containment project was called in for a decision by the Scottish Government. This length of wait for a decision from ministers could discourage investment in Scotland. It's now over a month since I last raised this in the Chamber, with no update since. Does the First Minister acknowledge that long waits for planning decisions are bad for business?
First Minister.
I certainly want to make sure that we take decisions as efficiently and as swiftly as we possibly can do, but I also have to make sure that the Government has adequate space and opportunity to consider all of the issues that are involved, and I'm quite sure Beatrice Wishart would understand the significance of that point. So the Government, beyond indicating that the issue is under consideration, there is little more I can say given this is a live planning application. But I understand the importance of the point that Beatrice Wishart puts to me and the importance of early decision-making where practical.
Thank you. We move to general constituency questions, and I call Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Pension age disability payment is opening for applications across the whole of Scotland this week, replacing the UK Government's attendance allowance. Can the First Minister advise what steps the Scottish Government are taking to ensure that older people who are disabled, terminally ill or have care needs in my constituency get the money they need to help them look after themselves, stay safe and live with dignity?
First Minister.
Sir, I'm very pleased to confirm to Parliament that Pension Aid Disability Payment launched on Tuesday. This will pay up to £441 a month extra to disabled people over state pension age. We estimate it will help more than 170,000 disabled people or people living with a long-term health condition who need help looking after themselves or supervision to stay safe. This launch ensures that disabled people of all age groups in Scotland are now able to receive support from a social security system based on dignity, fairness and respect. Those principles were at the heart of the legislation that this Government brought to Parliament, and I am very pleased that we continue to apply those principles as we deliver the type of social security system that I think benefits and supports individuals in Scotland who are most in need at this particular moment.
Craig Hoy.
Constituent Michael Rankin is 12 and suffers from the degenerative condition Duchenne muscular dystrophy. He can still walk with an aid at home, but his mother does not know for how long this will continue. The First Minister will be aware of the efforts of Scottish parents seeking access to the drug Givinostat, which is used to treat the condition by holding back the progression of irreversible muscle damage. The drug has now been approved by the MHRA and can be accessed in the NHS through the Early Access Programme. It is now being prescribed in some NHS trusts in England and in Wales, but the Scottish Medicines Consortium is yet to assess its use here. In the meantime, sadly, health boards are not prescribing the drug. First Minister, for these boys, time is muscle. So will he urgently agree to meet with parents, including Nicola Rankin, to learn more about how this drug could be life-changing for boys like Michael?
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Hoy for raising this important issue. And yesterday, on Tuesday, the Health Secretary met with some of the families who are involved in the efforts that Mr Hoy has drawn to the attention of Parliament. Yesterday, the Health Secretary met with 4 health boards involved in providing services to children with this condition to discuss what is needed to enable delivery of the medicine in a way that is safe, but also ensures fair and equitable access across the country at pace. So there is very active work underway to try to deliver on the expectations of Mr Hoy and his constituents. We are very sympathetic and are trying to get there as fast as we possibly can do. I think the engagement that the Health Secretary has had so far is perhaps sufficient. If there is a need to meet me personally, I will of course be happy to do so. But I assure Mr Hoy that this issue is being advanced with urgency by the Health Secretary.
Duncan Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This morning I met with families of children with additional support needs, and they have joined us in the gallery today. They've spent years fighting for the support their children need, and they represent thousands of parents across the country whose children are being failed, some of them out of education entirely. And a survey they ran found 97% said education is failing to meet their children's needs. They've engaged in every process, consultation, review and action plan. They've met ministers, responded to calls for evidence and taken their experiences all the way to this Parliament, but still they're being ignored. So can I ask the First Minister, why isn't he listening to the parents? When will he admit the Government are failing on ASN? And will he commit today, in front of the families in the gallery, to finally listen to them, take the urgent, properly resourced action their children need and deserve?
First Minister.
President, I recognise the importance of ensuring that the needs of every child are met within our education system. For some young people with additional support needs, that can be achieved within mainstream education. For others, it is not possible, and those judgments should be made on the needs and the assessed needs of every individual child. And the Government works closely with our local authority partners in delivering on these objectives, with over £1 billion being spent by local authorities in the last financial year on additional support for learning. The Government recognised, however, the significance of the demand for services in its latest budget settlement, and as part of that settlement we specifically agreed an additional £29 million in funding in the draft budget, which is to be allocated through local authorities in response to the legitimate issues that Pam Duncan Glancy puts to me today. So I assure Pam Duncan Glancy and those that she speaks on behalf of today of the importance that we attach to this issue. We are working with local authorities to make sure that the needs of every child are met, and that will continue to be our approach.
Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Security analysts have warned that the UK Government plans to build a network of mini-nuclear power stations across the country and have failed to adequately assess major security threats to the public. Does the First Minister share these concerns, and does he agree that rather than pursuing plans to invest in costly, slow-to-build and potentially hazardous nuclear power plants, the UK Government should be supporting investment in Scotland's huge renewable energy potential, which is far faster to build, cheaper and safer? First Minister.
As Jackie Dunbar and as Parliament will know, the Government does not support energy production from nuclear power, and we believe that the investment that is necessary in our energy networks will be more cost-effective if invested in renewable energy. I'm reminded that Hinkley Point C, which is a new nuclear power station, is now projected to cost up to £46 billion, more than double the original cost estimate. So I think there are opportunities for us to deliver energy security for our country through a variety of interventions on renewable energy, through offshore wind, through pumped storage and through various other technologies, and that will certainly be the position adopted by the Scottish Government.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland issued a statement on their concerns around government progress of respiratory health policy. Respiratory conditions like COPD are leading causes of death and health inequalities in Scotland. However, the Government is stagnating in its delivery of the action plan. This lack of progress in delivery, including ensuring universal access to pulmonary rehab, risks increasing inequality and the number of preventable deaths. Can I therefore ask the First Minister whether his government will deliver on the commitments made within the plan before the end of this Parliament?
First Minister.
The Government will engage with Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland. They're an organisation that does fantastic work in raising awareness on all of these questions. We are supporting a range of prescribing routes for COPD, and the Centre for Sustainable Delivery is working with COPD patients to develop new treatment pathways. There's a variety of different policy measures that we are taking forward, including some of the wider societal policies such as low emission zones, which are aimed to assist in improving air quality, which will be of benefit to individuals with COPD. And our Respiratory Care Action Plan sets out how we are working to improve prevention, diagnosis, care, treatment and support. But the Government will, of course, be happy to engage further with Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland and with patients to determine what further steps we can take.
Rose McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, my constituents Scott and Olivia Lyne recently received the heartbreaking news their 1-year-old son Blair has retinoblastoma, which is a rare type of eye cancer that affects young children, roughly about 50 children in the UK each year. Whilst it can be hereditary, it can also affect a child purely by chance. It can't be predicted or prevented, and it simply appears as a squint or a glow in the eye. Now, Scott and Olivia are determined to raise public awareness given the importance of early diagnosis. So will the First Minister join me in promoting the visibility of retinoblastoma, thanking the incredible NHS teams involved in their care across Scotland, and urge families to make an urgent appointment if they think there should be any concerns?
First Minister.
I do join Rose McCall in endorsing that approach and in welcoming the comments that she has made to Parliament today. I think the central point that Rose McCall makes about early intervention and early assessment is really important. I think some of the fantastic work that can be done in relation to ophthalmology services is an illustration of early intervention having significant benefits as a consequence. So I very much endorse the points that Rose McCall has made. I wish her and her constituents well. I'm glad to hear that they are being well supported by the National Health Service. I would expect nothing else. And if there are, of course, any issues that arise in the course of their journey, the Health Secretary will be happy to assist in any way that he can.
Bill Kidd.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, yesterday the highly thought of Glasgow Disability Alliance issued a stark warning that hundreds of thousands of disabled Scots could lose out from Westminster's brutal welfare cuts. Last night in this Parliament, Scottish Labour MPs voted to support Westminster austerity's cuts to disabled people. Can the First Minister outline how his government is supporting disabled people in my constituency and across Scotland against the backdrop of Labour's accelerated Westminster austerity?
First Minister.
President, I'm deeply concerned about the cuts to sickness and disability benefits that have been announced by the United Kingdom Government. Indeed, I referred to them in my earlier answers to Anas Sarwar. The changes will push 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, into poverty by the end of this decade, and it will reduce the funding that Scotland receives for devolved disability benefits. So, Parliament had an opportunity yesterday to express its firm opinion on these commitments. The Government, of course, expressed our opposition to the changes. I'm staggered that Scottish Labour MSPs supported the cuts, but that tells us all we need to know, that the Labour Party is in favour of continuing austerity and inflicting damage on the population of Scotland, while this Government will stand to take actions to reduce poverty and support the population in Scotland.
Daniel Johnson.
The First Minister will have seen reports over Easter recess that Sidara Capital has been given additional time to come forward with an updated bid for the Wood Group. This is concerning for two reasons. First of all, the potential loss of HQ functions and the associated expertise from the Aberdeen headquarters. But secondly, the Wood Group is critical to our ability to deliver engineering in the North Sea, which is vital for our renewables future. It's my understanding that it's pressure on the Wood Group's lenders that have led to this situation. So can I ask, what discussions has the First Minister had directly with the Wood Group about this? And secondly, has either the Scottish Government or its agencies explored the possibility of either financial guarantees or facilities which might ease these short-term pressures and retain this vital Scottish company in Scottish ownership?
First Minister.
So these are obviously complex corporate decisions that are being arrived at. The Scottish Government will, in all of these circumstances, as we do in case of this type, offer the engagement of the Deputy First Minister and Scottish Enterprise to determine if there are any steps we can take to assist in ensuring that the legitimate points that Mr Johnson puts to me of the importance of retaining headquarters functions and the effectiveness of these organisations within Scotland, and we will engage on that basis.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Neil Bibby, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the public gallery and the chamber to do so.